Hey guys, Shay here from Fool on a Journey, and I want to take some time and talk about personifying tarot decks. So this is sort of my VR to Katie Flowers video that she put out about it. I will link it below. I think she stated it amazing. I think she explained, her view on it phenomenally, and I was like nodding my head through the whole video, like, yes, okay. But I felt like there was a little bit more to what other people are doing and what other people are missing from this idea of personifying a deck. So I explained in my comment on her video that a lot of the language choices I personally use for my decks, she said this, he said this, he made me feel, those kinds of things are meant sort of as a signal to other people about how much these decks mean to me. They're very important to me. Not only have I spent a lot of money on them, I spend a lot of time with them. And a great example of that, which I did use in the comment that I left on Katie's video, was a car. You're going to ride with somebody in their car, and they're the kind of person that's just like, yeah, whatever, we'll take my car. But if you are getting in the car with someone who says, yeah, it's okay, you can ride in my baby, are you going to eat in that person's car? No. You're going to be like, oh, this is their baby. This is very important. So it really symbolizes just how much something specifically means to you in a way that people, whether they understand it or not, automatically clue into whether I get what you're saying or why. I know what you mean about, I know what this thing means to you because of how you talk about it, even if I don't understand why it's that important. Some people... my very first car was this horrible, ugly, it was this like dark green 1999 Mitsubishi Mirage. And the way that I explained it to people, I named it Rufus, and I loved that car. I really loved it. And I said that it made me think of when you go to the pound and then you see the ugliest dog in the pound and think, oh, I have to take that one home. And that was Rufus for me. And I loved Rufus. So nobody understood why I loved that car. It was a piece of crap, but I did. And people knew that because it was Rufus. Other people knew to call it Rufus. People were nice to Rufus, even when Rufus had problems. So it's just sort of a signal to other people, hey, whether this means anything to you or not, it does mean something to me. So I kind of wanted to put that spin out there. And then the other side of it for me personally, and I think Katie really touched on this, was each deck makes you feel something different. When I first started amassing decks, these were some of the first decks that I got. I got most of these in 2015, which is when I started really collecting a lot of decks. And I would actually struggle with which one I wanted to work with for the day. And so then I started using all of them in one day, and the way that I would do that is pull the same card from all the decks, sort of in the vein of if you're watching Kellyanne Maddox's new Cardslinger series, the Let's Compare. I'll link that below too. If you're watching that series, she really just sort of pulls them out and she talks about how each card, even though it's the same card, because it's from a different deck, sort of lends it to a different feeling of that same archetype. So I pulled out some of my first ones, and I kind of want to walk you through what really made me understand, okay, these decks are different. They have a totally different message. They have a totally different voice. They feel different. This is not just a tarot deck and a tarot deck and a tarot deck and a tarot deck. It's not over and over. It's something really unique unto itself. So I kind of want to walk you through a little bit about what I saw. And my process. So I would pick up the card one at a time, and I would look at just one Fool from one deck, and I would really look at all the details. So if you're looking at this deck from the Deviant Moon Tarot, so he's in pajamas, so you're thinking late at night, obviously the moon is up. He's running through the water where there are flesh-eating fish, but there's a boat right there. He doesn't need to be in the water. He doesn't need to be being bitten by the fish. And he's got this stupid, crazy grin on his face. So to me, this automatically, the word that came to my mind was, this dude's insane. This is not about a fool. This is about a crazy person. And so the key word that I associate with this fool in particular is insanity. You're doing something that makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, you're acting crazy. Like, that's what this Fool now means to me. This Fool is from the Tarot of Loka. And if you're looking at this guy nice and close, so his clothes are falling apart. There's some tatters. He's patched them up about 1,000,000 times. He's got this rose in his mouth that really sort of keyed me in to this idea of he's going to woo some woman. Like, that's kind of like this idea that I get, is he's like this like roguish kind of guy who is oblivious to the fact that he looks like a complete hot mess because he's going to get this, you know, his lady love anyway. And the word that came to me was foolish. Like, I just immediately thought, this is foolish. But in that sort of harmless, you can't be serious kind of way, like in a kind of silly sort of thing. But foolish was the word that really clued me into this. And then when you start comparing, okay, this is insanity, this is foolishness, they really start dividing themselves from each other. They start really becoming their own unique voice. Then you get to, this is from the Russian Black Tarot, and I don't know if you can see the details super well, but on its feet and hands there's blood, and it looks like he stomped on something and then killed it to take its flower because he just wanted to, because why not? And he's got this Joker smile cut across his face, and that to me is like that energy of that. It's not evil, but it just is so thoughtless and so senseless that it does not consider any other people's feelings at all. It wanted the flower, so it killed you for the flower. Like, it's not vicious, it's not evil, but it's not good, it's not benevolent. It's its own sort of sociopathic, only worried about what it wants kind of thing, not thinking about anybody but itself. You know, it's instant gratification. You know, it's just, as you keep going, you know, down the line of Fools and of other cards, you really start seeing these individual voices emerge from these decks. This one is this really, it almost looks like it's given up. There's all of these crazy tentacle monsters in the back, and there's skeletons of dead animals, and this dog's biting its leg, and he's just like walking toward this cliff like, oh, I'm either gonna walk off the end of this cliff and find an answer, or I'm gonna die, but it's gotta be better than this, you know? So he's got this whole, I'm just gonna walk off and see what happens because it can't get worse kind of attitude going on, you know, in this Fool. And that's really what gives your tarot decks a voice. And if you are not sitting down and letting them be, you know, their own voice and letting them create their own voice, I feel like you are majorly missing out. I feel like that is where people sort of start getting the sense of, you know, this deck is for fall, this deck is for spring. It's not necessarily just the colors in the deck, it's how does the deck talk to you personally. There was another series of hashtags that were going on that K. Chris was doing that was the SBD, which was surrounded by decks, and I'll link a couple of those videos below. That was another great sort of review of same cards from different decks. And I think that a lot of your individual experience comes from the fact that whether we are using them as a tool for our spiritual practice or as a tool for our job if we're a professional reader, the bottom line is when you are looking at this picture, it's art. And how you experience art is a sum total of your life experience up to that point where now you're looking at this card or this piece of art and having a reaction. So Katey Flowers also mentioned that she would have people say, you know, well, you said this deck was cheeky, or you said this deck was silly, and that's not what I experienced. Well, of course it's not. You're not a clone of somebody. You don't have the same life experiences. Of course your reaction won't be the same as someone else's to that piece of art. But I think that's a good thing. I mean, that's an awesome thing. That gives us the opportunity to then hear, you know, maybe you looked at this and saw something totally different, and now you've heard my opinion, and you're like, oh yeah, I get that. So our we are expanding each other's experience whenever we talk about what we see in a piece of art. If it's different than someone else's, if it's the same as someone else's, it's all about expanding what you can see when you look at the picture. If you don't really get kind of how I went about getting this idea of, the guy going to get the girl with the rose in his mouth, I did pull out another one. This is the star from the Deviant Moon Tarot. And the reason I pulled this one out is because I was able to still find my story that I wrote. And it's very small, like maybe 100 words, maybe, not even, probably not even. But what I would do is pull the card out and then meditate. For me personally, that's sort of like a repetitive prayer process because I can't just sit quietly. So I would meditate for a little bit, just looking at the card. I'd close my eyes for a little bit and imagine the card. And I realized later, once I had sort of been looking farther into tarot and what you can do with tarot and how to use it for yourself personally, I realized that essentially what I was doing was the very beginnings of pathworking. And the story that I wrote for the star was a sad monster never goes out during the day because people are afraid of her and it hurts her feelings to see their fear. So she never feels the sun on her face. But sometimes if the night is clear when she goes to draw her water, the light from the stars make her finally feel seen and unjudged. And the key word that I chose was peace. So if that's something that you're interested in, please do. That's how I understand my decks, is because I sat there and I've got this story for all of these cards, so I always have this built up feeling around them. If you haven't done that yet, I highly encourage it. I think it's awesome. Again, thank you, Katey, for this awesome, amazing topic of conversation. I think that it's definitely something I want to hear more of other people's opinions about. And do you do all of these borderline personification things where like, well, this deck is better for this season, or this deck is better for this kinds of reading? Do you have a deck that you always grab when you're doing a romance reading? That's kind of giving it a personality. So any part of that conversation that anybody else wants to put out there on YouTube, I am super fascinated and very excited that we're all talking about this now. And as always, thanks for watching.